The stars looked different when you were 3 months away from home. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Starbound, watching the alien sun cast strange purple light across his ship. His crew moved around him with quiet purpose, checking systems and preparing for what could be the most important day in human history. "Captain, the Zephyrian ship is approaching," said Amy Foster from her communication station. Her voice carried the tension they all felt. "They'll be here in 20 minutes. Jake nodded and straightened his dress uniform. The blue fabric felt stiff and unfamiliar after months of wearing standard ship clothes. Today was different, though. Today, humanity would meet the Zephyrian Empire for the first time, and everything had to be perfect. Dr. Lisa Hayes looked up from her data pad, her brown eyes worried. "Jake, I've been reading their cultural files again. The Zephyrians have destroyed entire species for being what they call primitive. We have to be careful." "I know," Jake said, "but we can't show fear. They respect strength, not weakness." Tony Cruz wiped grease from his hands as he climbed up from the engine room. The engineer had been working all night to make sure their ship looked its best. "Everything's running smooth, Captain. But their technology is still hundreds of years ahead of ours. One of their fighters could probably take out our whole ship." Jake had read the same reports. The Zephyrian Empire controlled half the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds with technology that seemed like magic compared to human science. Their ships moved faster than light without the massive engines humans needed. Their weapons could destroy planets. Their soldiers lived for centuries and never seemed to age. "Visual contact," Amy announced, putting it on screen now. The main display flickered to life, showing a ship that took Jake's breath away. The Zephyrian vessel was enormous, at least 10 times the size of the Starbound. Its hull was made of something that looked like silver glass, curved and flowing like it had been grown instead of built. Beautiful patterns of light moved across its surface like living art. "It's incredible," Lisa whispered. "It's terrifying," Tony muttered. A new voice came over the communication system, speaking perfect English with an accent like music. "Human vessel Starbound. This is Princess Zarathiel of the Zephyrian Empire. Prepare to receive our delegation." Jake stepped forward. "This is Captain Jake Morrison. We are honored by your visit, Your Highness. We welcome you aboard." There was a pause. Then the voice came again, colder this time. "We will transport directly to your bridge. Do not be alarmed by our technology." Before Jake could respond, the air in front of him began to shimmer. Points of light appeared from nothing, growing brighter and taking shape. In seconds, 5 figures materialized on his bridge as if they had always been there. Jake's first thought was that they looked almost human. Almost, but not quite. The 4 guards were tall and graceful, with pale skin that seemed to glow from within. Their eyes were larger than human eyes and completely silver like mirrors. They wore armor that looked like it was made of the same material as their ship, but it was the 5th figure that commanded attention. Princess Zarathiel was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. She stood nearly 7 feet tall with long silver hair that moved as if it was underwater. Her skin was perfect white marble, and when she looked at Jake, her silver eyes seemed to see right through him. She wore a dress that shifted color as she moved, going from deep blue to purple to silver. A crown of twisted metal floated above her head without touching it, glowing with soft light. "Captain Morrison," she said, and her voice made the air itself seem to sing. "I am Princess Zarathiel, heir to the Zephyrian throne and speaker for the Imperial Council. We have come to judge whether your species is worthy of joining the galactic community." Jake bowed slightly, the way the diplomats had taught him. "We are grateful for this opportunity, Your Highness. We hope to prove that humanity can contribute to the galaxy." The princess walked around the bridge, her silver eyes taking in every detail. Jake could see the judgment in her gaze as she looked at their primitive computers, their basic displays, their simple weapon systems. "Your ship is quaint," she said finally, "like something a child might build. But we are not here to discuss your technology. We are here to learn about your people." Lisa stepped forward with a small bow. "Your Highness, we have prepared gifts from our world. Art, music, literature, things that show the beauty of human culture." One of the guards brought forward a container and Lisa began taking out items. A painting of Earth's sunset, a recording of Mozart's Symphony No. 9, a leather-bound book of Shakespeare's sonnets, a small sculpture made by a child in New York. Princess Zarathiel examined each item with growing disappointment. She held the painting up to the light, tilted her head at the music, flipped through the book without really reading it. "Pretty," she said at last. but primitive. We have seen art that can change reality, music that can heal wounds, stories that can bring the dead back to life. This is simple. Jake felt his crew's disappointment, but he wasn't ready to give up. Your Highness, these things may seem simple, but they represent something important about humanity. Our greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our heart, our spirit, our ability to hope even when everything seems impossible. The princess turned to face him, and for a moment her perfect face showed something that might have been curiosity. Heart? She said. Spirit? These are just words, Captain. Your species speaks of courage, of this thing you call the human spirit. But I see nothing here that my people have not seen before from a dozen other primitive races. She moved closer to Jake, and he could smell something like winter air and starlight. If it's real. Show me, human, she said, her voice like crystal chimes. Prove that there is anything special about your kind beyond your primitive emotions. Show me this spirit you speak of, or admit that humanity is just another weak species that will be forgotten when your sun burns out. The bridge fell silent. Jake could hear his heart beating, could feel his crew watching him. Everything humanity had worked for, everything they had dreamed of, came down to this moment. He looked into those silver eyes and saw something unexpected. Not just arrogance, but loneliness, a deep ancient sadness that came from ruling the galaxy, but never understanding what made life worth living. I accept your challenge, Your Highness, Jake said quietly, but I think you'll be surprised by what we show you. Princess Zarathiel smiled, but it was a cold smile, like sunlight on ice. We shall see, Captain Morrison. We shall see. The next morning, Princess Zarathiel returned to the Starbound with a single guard. Jake met them in the ship's main conference room, along with his senior staff. The princess looked even more beautiful in the artificial light, but her silver eyes were as cold as space itself. Captain Morrison, she said, settling into a chair that seemed too small for her tall frame. I have decided on your test. It is quite simple, really. She waved her hand, and a holographic display appeared in the air above the table. Jake and his crew leaned forward to see a star map showing a distant part of the galaxy. There is a dead system on the edge of known space, the princess explained. Long ago, a ship from an ancient race crashed there. Inside that ship is an artifact of great power. My people have known about it for centuries, but we have never been able to retrieve it. Lisa studied the display with growing concern. Why haven't you retrieved it? With your advanced technology, surely. Princess Zarathiel's laugh was like breaking glass. The ship sits in the middle of a radiation storm, Doctor. The kind of radiation that can kill any living thing in minutes. Our automated systems fail within hours. Even our strongest shields cannot protect against it. Tony whistled low. And you want us to go there? With our primitive technology? I want you to retrieve the artifact, the princess said. If you succeed, I will acknowledge that humans possess something beyond mere sentiment. I will recommend that your species be accepted into the galactic community as equals, not subjects. She stood up, her dress shifting from blue to deep red. But if you fail, Captain Morrison, your species will be classified as a minor civilization. You will be forever barred from the core worlds. Humanity will spend the rest of its existence on the outer rim, forgotten and alone. Jake felt his stomach drop. Your Highness, surely there must be another way to prove ourselves. Some other test? This is the test I have chosen, she said firmly. You spoke of the human spirit, of your ability to hope against impossible odds. This is impossible, Captain. Show me your hope. After the princess left, Jake's crew sat in stunned silence. The holographic display still showed the distant system, marked with warning symbols that made Jake's blood run cold. It's suicide, Pete Walker said finally. The older man served as Jake's second in command, and his face was grim. Jake, the radiation levels they're talking about. We'd be dead before we even got close to that ship. Lisa was running calculations on her tablet. Pete's right. Our radiation shielding is decades behind Zephyrian technology. If their systems can't handle it, we don't have a chance. Maybe we do, Tony said slowly. Everyone turned to look at the engineer. I mean, our tech is primitive compared to theirs, but sometimes primitive means simple. Simple means reliable. Maybe there's something they're missing. Amy had been quiet, but now she spoke up. There's something else. I've been monitoring Zephyrian communications. The princess has been talking to someone on her ship about us. She's curious about our mission. Really curious? Curious how? Jake asked. Like she wants to understand something she's never seen before. Like she's not just testing us. Like she's looking for something. Jake walked to the window and stared out at the alien stars. His reflection looked tired and worried. Behind him, his crew continued to debate the impossible mission. The princess said her people have never been able to retrieve this artifact, he said finally, but they've had centuries to try. Why is it so important that they keep going back? Lisa looked up from her calculations. Maybe it's not about the artifact itself. Maybe it's about what it represents. Think about it. An ancient race, something that existed before the Zephyrians. Maybe this is their way of connecting to their past. Or maybe, Pete said darkly, it's their way of getting rid of troublesome species without having to destroy them outright. Send them on an impossible mission and let radiation do the work. Jake turned back to his crew. These people had followed him across the galaxy, trusting him to keep them safe and represent their entire species. Now he was being asked to lead them into certain death. What if we're thinking about this wrong? He said suddenly. What if the test isn't really about retrieving the artifact? What if it's about something else entirely? Like what? Tony asked. I keep thinking about the look in her eyes when she challenged us. It wasn't just arrogance. There was something else there. Something sad, Amy nodded. I saw it too. Like she was hoping for something specific. The Zephyrians have conquered half the galaxy. Jake continued. They have technology that can do almost anything. But when was the last time they were challenged? When was the last time they had to struggle for something? Maybe they've forgotten what that feels like. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Jake, are you suggesting we actually try this? Because the math doesn't lie. The radiation will kill us. The math says their technology can't handle it either, Jake replied. But what if the answer isn't better technology? What if it's something else? Over the next 3 days, Tony worked around the clock to modify their ship's systems. He stripped shielding from non-essential areas and concentrated it around the bridge and engine room. He rerouted power systems to create redundant backups. He even took apart some of their weapons to use the parts for extra protection. Lisa studied every scrap of data about the ancient race and their ships. The files were incomplete, but she began to piece together a picture of a people who valued knowledge above power, wisdom above conquest. Amy monitored Zephyrian communications and reported that Princess Zarathiel was spending hours each day watching recordings of human culture. Not just the gifts they had given her, but everything she could find about Earth and its people. Pete remained skeptical, but he worked with Tony on emergency procedures and evacuation plans. If we're going to do this insane thing, he said, we're going to do it right. Jake spent the time thinking. He walked the halls of his ship, talked to his crew, and tried to understand what the princess really wanted from them. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that this was about more than just retrieving an artifact. On the third night, he was alone on the bridge when Amy's communication system chimed. To his surprise, it was a direct message from Princess Zarathiel. Captain Morrison, her voice came through clearly. I have been watching your preparations. Your engineer's modifications are interesting, primitive but clever. Thank you, Your Highness, Jake said. We're doing our best with what we have. That is what intrigues me, she said. My people would never attempt this mission with such limited resources. They would demand better technology, more protection, guaranteed success. But you are willing to risk everything with tools that should not work. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Your Highness, may I ask you something? Why is this artifact so important? Your people have incredible technology, vast knowledge, power beyond imagining. What could this ancient relic possibly give you that you don't already have? The silence stretched so long that Jake thought she had ended the call. Then her voice came back, softer than before. Something we lost long ago, Captain. Something I am not sure we can ever get back. Before Jake could ask what she meant, the connection ended. He sat alone on his bridge, staring out at the stars, and realized that tomorrow they would either prove humanity's worth or die trying. The test was about to begin. The dead system looked like something from a nightmare. Jake stood on the bridge of the Starbound, staring at the massive radiation storm that filled the space ahead of them. Violent streams of energy twisted and danced in colors that human eyes weren't meant to see. Lightning that could destroy worlds crackled between clouds of deadly particles. My God, Lisa whispered from her science station. Jake, this is worse than the reading suggested. The radiation levels are off the charts. In the center of the storm, barely visible through the chaos, hung the ancient ship. It was huge, easily the size of a small city, and beautiful in a way that made Jake's chest ache. Its hull was dark and smooth, covered in patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. "There," Amy said, pointing at her display. "I'm picking up the artifact's signal. It's definitely inside that ship, but Jake..." She turned to look at him with worried eyes. "The signal isn't just a beacon. It's more complex than that. Almost like someone trying to communicate." Princess Zarathiel's voice came over the communication system from her ship, which hung safely outside the radiation field. "Beautiful, is it not, Captain? The Eternal ship has been calling out for centuries, but no one has been able to answer." "The Eternals?" Jake asked. "Is that what the ancient race was called?" "They were the builders of the first great civilization in this galaxy," the princess replied. "Wise, powerful, and completely extinct. Some say they chose to die rather than watch the universe grow cold and empty. Others believe they were destroyed by something they could not understand." Tony looked up from his engineering console, sweat beading on his forehead. "Captain, I've got our shields at maximum, but according to these readings, we'll have maybe 30 minutes before they start failing. After that we die," Pete finished grimly. Jake took a deep breath. "Take us in, slow and steady. Tony, monitor our shield integrity every second. Lisa, keep scanning that ship. I want to know everything you can tell me about it before we get there." The Starbound moved forward into the storm, and immediately Jake could feel the ship shuddering around them. Warning lights flashed on every console as radiation began hammering their shields. The hull groaned under the assault. "Shields at 90%, Tony called out. "Hull temperature rising fast." "The ship is incredible," Lisa said, her voice full of wonder despite their danger. "The design is completely organic, like it was grown instead of built. And Jake, I'm reading massive power sources throughout the hull, but they're all dark. Dead." As they got closer, the ancient ship filled their view screen. Jake could see details now. Flowing lines that looked like art. Massive windows that were dark and empty. Docking ports that seemed designed for ships very different from anything humans had built. "There," Amy pointed to her display. "The artifact is in the central section. I'm getting clearer readings now. Jake, this isn't just communicating. It's trying to guide us in, like it knows we're here." "Shields at 70%, Tony announced. "We're taking heavy damage to the outer hull." Jake made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "Take us to the docking port." "We're going aboard." "Jake, that's insane," Pete protested. "The radiation inside that ship will be even worse. We'll be dead in minutes." "Maybe," Jake said. "But whatever that artifact is, it's been calling for help for centuries. We didn't come all this way just to look at it through our screens." The docking procedure was a nightmare. Their ship's systems kept failing as radiation fried circuits faster than Tony could repair them. But somehow Amy managed to guide them to a port that seemed designed for their type of ship. As if the Eternals had built it knowing that someday, someone like them would come. "Sealing the docking tube," Tony reported. "But I don't know how long it will hold. The radiation is cooking our systems from the inside out." Jake grabbed an emergency radiation suit from the locker. The suit was clunky and primitive compared to Zephyrian technology, but it was all they had. "Lisa, Pete, you're with me. Tony, Amy, keep the ship running as long as you can. If we're not back in 20 minutes, leave without us." "Like hell," Amy said firmly. "We're not leaving anyone behind." The airlock opened with a hiss and Jake stepped into the alien ship. The corridor beyond was tall and graceful, with walls that seemed to pulse with faint inner light. The air was breathable but thick with radiation that made his suit's warning system scream. "This way," Lisa said, checking her scanner. "The artifact is about half a mile through the ship." They moved through corridors that were like walking through a cathedral. Everything was designed on a massive scale, as if built for giants. Beautiful symbols covered the walls, shifting and changing as they passed. Sometimes Jake thought he could almost understand what they meant. "The radiation is getting worse," Pete warned. "Our suits won't protect us much longer." They entered a vast chamber at the ship's heart and Jake stopped breathing. The artifact sat in the center of the room, but it wasn't what he had expected. Instead of some ancient weapon or tool, it was a crystal formation about the size of a person, glowing with soft blue light. And inside the crystal, Jake could see something moving. "My God," Lisa whispered. "There's someone in there. Someone alive." The crystal pulsed brighter as they approached, and suddenly Jake could hear a voice in his mind. Not words exactly, but thoughts and feelings that formed meaning. "So long. So very long. Waiting for someone to come. Someone to understand. You're not an artifact, Jake said out loud. You're a person. You're alive. Barely. The last of my kind. Trapped here when our ship died. Waiting for someone who would care more about life than treasure. Jake looked at the crystal prison and understood everything. This wasn't a test about retrieving some powerful weapon. This was about compassion. About being willing to help someone, even when it cost you everything. How do we free you? He asked. The voice in his mind grew weaker. The crystal feeds on life energy. Mine is nearly gone, but another's sacrifice could break the bonds. No, Pete said firmly. Jake, don't even think about it. There has to be another way. But Jake was already moving toward the crystal. The radiation in this chamber was so intense that his suit was failing, alarms screaming warnings that he ignored. He could feel the energy burning through his body, but he didn't stop. You would die for a stranger? The voice asked, amazed. Your species would give their lives for someone they have never met? That's what makes us human, Jake said simply. He placed his hands on the crystal and immediately felt his life energy being pulled away. But something unexpected happened. Instead of just draining him, the crystal began to resonate with something else. The combined will and strength of his entire crew. Through the ship's communication system, he could hear Tony's voice. Whatever you're doing, Captain, keep doing it. I'm rerouting all our remaining power to your location. Amy's voice joined in. The princess is asking what's happening. I told her we're saving a life. Pete grabbed Jake's shoulder. If you're doing this, we're doing it together. Lisa placed her hand on the crystal beside Jake's. That's right. We're all in this. The crystal flared with brilliant light, and Jake felt the ancient being's amazement and gratitude wash over him. The prison shattered like glass, and a figure of pure light stood before them for just a moment. I understand now, the voice whispered. This is what we lost. This is what your species still has. Thank you, humans. Thank you for showing me what it means to truly live. The figure began to fade, but not before Jake felt one last gift. Knowledge of how to get his crew safely home, and a message meant for Princess Zarathiel. As the light faded, Jake collapsed to his knees, his body burning with radiation sickness, but he was smiling. They had passed the real test. Jake drifted in and out of consciousness as his crew carried him back to the Starbound. The radiation had burned through his body like fire, and every breath was agony. But he could hear Lisa and Pete arguing over his medical readings, could feel Amy's steady hands as she helped guide them through the dying corridors of the Eternal ship. His vital signs are all over the place, Lisa said, her voice tight with worry. The radiation exposure is massive. I don't know if our medical equipment can handle this. It has to, Pete replied grimly. We're not losing him now. They made it back to the airlock just as Tony announced that their ship was falling apart. I can't hold her together much longer. His voice crackled over the comm. The radiation is frying everything. We need to get out of here now. Jake tried to speak, tried to tell them about the knowledge the Eternal had given him, but his voice wouldn't work. All he could do was grab Amy's hand and squeeze, hoping she would understand that something important had happened. The Starbound limped out of the radiation storm, leaving the ancient ship behind in its eternal dance with deadly energy. But as they cleared the worst of the radiation field, something incredible happened. The storm began to calm, the violent streams of energy slowing and fading like a wild beast finally finding peace. Princess Zarathiel's ship was waiting for them, its silver hull gleaming in the starlight. Almost immediately, her voice came over the communication system, but this time it sounded different. Softer, almost worried. Captain Morrison, what is your status? Our sensors detected massive energy readings from the Eternal ship. Amy took over communications while Lisa worked frantically over Jake's unconscious form. Your Highness, the captain is badly injured. The radiation exposure was severe. We need medical assistance. There was a pause. Then Princess Zarathiel said something that shocked everyone. I am transporting to your ship immediately. Prepare to receive medical aid. Your Highness, Amy protested. The radiation levels on our ship are still dangerous. You shouldn't risk. I have survived far worse than human radiation, Communications Officer Foster. Stand by. The air shimmered on the Starbound's bridge, and Princess Zarathiel materialized along with two of her guards. But instead of the cold, arrogant ruler they had met before, she looked almost frantic. Her silver eyes were wide with concern as she knelt beside Jake's still form. What happened in there? She demanded as her guards brought forward medical devices that looked like works of art. Our sensors showed the crystal formation was destroyed. Did you retrieve the artifact? Lisa looked up from her medical scanner, tears in her eyes. There was no artifact, Your Highness. There was a person, someone who had been trapped in that crystal for thousands of years. The captain freed him. Princess Zarathiel went very still. A person? You mean an eternal? One of them was still alive? Barely, Pete said, but alive, and the captain gave his life energy to free him. The princess stared at Jake's pale face for a long moment. Then she did something none of them expected. She placed her hands on Jake's chest and her own silver light began to flow into him. Your Highness, what are you doing? Lisa asked in amazement. Something I have not done in centuries, the princess replied, her voice strained with effort. I am sharing my life force with him. It is an old technique from before my people forgot what compassion meant. As her energy flowed into Jake, his color began to return. His breathing grew stronger. The radiation burns on his skin started to heal. Why? Amy asked quietly. Why would you risk yourself for him? Princess Zarathiel was quiet for a long moment, her hands still glowing as she poured her strength into Jake. Because he did something I thought was impossible. He gave everything to save a stranger. Not for glory, not for reward, but simply because it was right. Jake's eyes fluttered open, and the first thing he saw was the princess's face bent over his, her silver eyes filled with tears that looked like liquid starlight. Your Highness, he whispered, his voice rough but getting stronger. The Eternal. Did he? He is free, she said softly. We felt his passing throughout our ship. He was happy, at peace, and he left something for me. She helped Jake sit up, her touch gentle and caring. He showed me memories, Captain Morrison. Memories of what my people used to be like before we conquered the galaxy, before we forgot that power without compassion is just another form of death. Jake looked around at his crew, all of them staring at the princess in wonder. He told me something too, he said slowly. About the test. It was never about the artifact, was it? Princess Zarathiel shook her head, her long silver hair falling around her shoulders. The Eternals created that test centuries ago before they died out. They knew that someday species like yours would reach for the stars. They wanted to make sure that when we found them, we would know the difference between those who sought power and those who understood love. She stood up, but kept one hand on Jake's shoulder. My people have sent dozens of expeditions to that ship over the centuries. Every one of them focused on the crystal's power, on what they could gain by possessing it. They all failed because they saw only treasure where you saw a person in need. Tony looked up from his repairs, his face streaked with grease and exhaustion. So we passed? Humanity gets to join the galactic community? The princess smiled, and for the first time it was warm and genuine. More than that. The Eternal's final message was clear. Your species possesses something that my people have lost. The courage to value another's freedom above your own survival. He named you as the inheritors of their legacy. What does that mean? Lisa asked. It means that humanity will not be joining the galactic community as junior members, Princess Zarathiel explained. You will be joining as teachers, as guides for species like mine who have forgotten what it truly means to be alive. She walked to the view screen and looked out at the stars. I have lived for over 1,000 years, Captain Morrison. I have seen the rise and fall of civilizations, watched planets born and stars die. But until today, I had never seen someone choose another's life over their own with no hope of reward. Jake struggled to his feet, still weak but determined to stand. Your Highness, what we did is not special. It's just human nature. Any of us would have done the same thing. She turned to look at him and her silver eyes were bright with something that might have been hope. That, Captain, is exactly what makes it special. You see it as ordinary because to you, caring for others is as natural as breathing. But to the rest of the galaxy, what you did today was miraculous. Amy was monitoring the communication systems when she looked up in surprise. Captain, I'm getting messages from all over the galaxy. Word is spreading about what happened here. Other species are asking to meet with us. Princess Zarathiel nodded. The galaxy has been waiting for someone like you for a very long time. Someone who could remind us what we used to be, what we could be again. Jake looked around at his crew, Pete with his steady reliability, Lisa with her brilliant mind and caring heart, Tony with his clever hands and loyal spirit, Amy with her curiosity and courage. They were just ordinary humans doing what felt right. Your Highness, he said finally, if you really want to understand humanity, you should come with us, back to Earth, see how we live, how we treat each other, not as some test or evaluation, but as friends. The princess stared at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it transformed her entire face. I would be honored, Captain Morrison. I think it is time I learned what your people call home. As the two ships prepared for the long journey back to Earth, Jake realized that they hadn't just passed a test. They had started something new. Something that might change the galaxy forever. All because they couldn't walk away from someone who needed help. 3 weeks later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the Starbound, watching Earth grow larger in the view screen. The blue marble of his homeworld had never looked more beautiful, with its swirling white clouds and brown-green continents. Beside him, Princess Zarathiel stared at the planet with wonder in her silver eyes. It's so small, she whispered. From here, it looks like something I could hold in my hands. How can one small world produce people like you? Jake smiled. Maybe it's because we're small that we learn to take care of each other. When you only have one world, you make sure everyone on it matters. During the journey home, the princess had spent her time learning about humanity. She watched movies and listened to music, read books, and studied Earth's history. She was fascinated by human art, confused by human humor, and amazed by human kindness. But most of all, she was curious about families. I still do not understand, she said now, turning from the view screen to look at Jake. Your crew members are not related to you. You share no blood, no genetic connection. Yet you were willing to die for them. They're not my family by birth, Jake explained, but they're my family by choice. That makes the bond even stronger sometimes. Lisa joined them on the observation deck, carrying a cup of coffee and looking tired but happy. Jake, Earth Control is asking for our full report. They want to know everything about the Zephyrian Empire and what happened out there. They can wait a little longer, Jake said. Right now, I'm more interested in showing our guest what Earth is really like. Princess Zarathiel had been quiet during most of the journey, processing everything she had learned. But as Earth grew closer, she seemed to become more alive, more curious about everything she saw. Tell me about your cities, she said. Are they like the great spires of Zephyr Prime? Amy, who was monitoring communications, laughed softly. Nothing like that, Your Highness. Our cities are smaller, more human-sized, but they're full of life. Full of people doing ordinary things that somehow add up to something extraordinary. The princess had asked 1,000 questions during the trip. She wanted to know about human families, about how children were raised and how old people were cared for. She was amazed that humans would adopt children who weren't their own, that they would take care of elderly parents even when it was difficult. On Zephyr Prime, she had told them, the old are honored but separate. The young are trained from birth for their roles in society. But you mix all ages together. You let children play while adults work. You let old people share their wisdom while still being part of daily life. Tony had tried to explain baseball to her, which led to a long discussion about sports and competition. The princess couldn't understand why humans would compete so fiercely, but then help their opponents when they were injured. Because it's just a game, Tony had said. The competition is fun, but the people matter more than winning. Now, as they approached Earth's atmosphere, Princess Zarathiel seemed nervous for the first time since Jake had known her. What if your people do not accept me? She asked. I am not human. I am from a race that has conquered and destroyed. What if they see me as a threat? Pete, who had been checking their descent course, looked up with a grin. Your Highness, you saved our captain's life. You shared your own life force with him. Trust me, humans remember things like that. The landing was smooth, touching down at the spaceport outside New York City. As they walked down the exit ramp, Jake could see crowds of people waiting behind security barriers. News crews with cameras, scientists with recording equipment, government officials in suits, but also just ordinary people who had come to see the first alien visitor to Earth. Princess Zarathiel hesitated at the top of the ramp, looking out at all the faces staring back at her. Jake could see the uncertainty in her silver eyes. They look so different from each other, she said softly. Different colors, different ages, different everything. How do you all live together? Sometimes we don't do it very well, Jake admitted. But we keep trying. That's what makes us human. As they reached the bottom of the ramp, a little girl broke away from the crowd and ran toward them. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. With dark hair and pigtails and a big smile on her face, Security moved to intercept her, but Jake held up his hand. The little girl stopped in front of Princess Zarathiel and looked up at her with curious eyes. "Are you really a space princess?" she asked. Princess Zarathiel knelt down to the child's level, her flowing dress pooling around her like liquid starlight. "I am," she said gently. "What is your name?"
"Emma," the little girl said.
"My mom says you came from really far away." "Farther than you can imagine," the princess replied. "But your world is much more beautiful than mine." Emma thought about this seriously. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a daisy chain she had been making. "This is for you," she said, placing the flowers around Princess Zarathiel's wrist. "Welcome to Earth." The princess stared at the simple gift, just weeds and flowers woven together by a child's hands, but Jake could see tears forming in her silver eyes. "Thank you, Emma," she whispered. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me." The moment was captured by dozens of cameras, and Jake knew that image would be remembered forever. The alien princess kneeling in the dirt, accepting a gift from a human child, both of them smiling with pure joy. Over the following weeks, Princess Zarathiel traveled around Earth. She visited schools where children taught her to draw with crayons. She went to hospitals where doctors showed her how humans cared for the sick and injured. She attended a wedding where she watched two people promise to love each other forever, and a funeral where she saw how humans honored their dead. She was amazed by everything: street musicians playing for spare change, volunteers serving food to hungry people, teenagers helping elderly neighbors with their groceries, parents staying up all night with sick babies. "I begin to understand," she told Jake one evening as they sat in Central Park, watching families play while the sun set behind the city skyline. "It is not that you are better than other species. It is that you never stopped believing that individual lives matter." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "My people became so focused on the greatness of our civilization that we forgot about the greatness of ordinary kindness," she explained. "We can move stars and reshape planets, but we cannot do what that little girl did when she gave me flowers. We cannot love someone simply because they exist." A week later, Princess Zarathiel announced that she would be staying on Earth for a full year, learning about human society. More importantly, she had convinced the Zephyrian Empire to send other representatives to study human culture. "We have much to learn from you," she told the United Nations in a speech that was broadcast across the galaxy. "You have shown us that true strength comes not from conquering others, but from caring for them. Not from being perfect, but from trying to be better." She paused, touching the faded daisy chain that she still wore on her wrist. "I came to test humanity, to judge whether you were worthy of joining the galactic community," she continued. "Instead, I learned that the galaxy is not worthy of you. But perhaps if we try very hard, we can become so." Jake watched the speech from his apartment in New York, surrounded by his crew who had become his family. They had been offered new assignments, bigger ships, important positions in the growing Earth-Zephyr alliance. But they had all chosen to stay together. "So what now, Captain?" Amy asked. "What does humanity do with the galaxy watching?" Jake looked out his window at the city below. People were going about their ordinary lives, working, playing, caring for each other in a million small ways. "Just being human. We do what we've always done," he said simply. "We take care of each other. We help strangers. We hope for the best and work to make it happen. We show the galaxy that the most important thing in the universe isn't power or knowledge or technology." "What is it then?" Lisa asked. Jake smiled, thinking of a little girl giving flowers to a space princess, of his crew risking everything to free a stranger, of an alien learning to love the simple act of human kindness. "Love," he said. "Just love. It's the one thing that makes everything else worth having." Outside his window, Earth continued to turn, carrying its cargo of ordinary people doing extraordinary things simply because it was right. And somewhere among the stars, other species were beginning to learn what it truly meant to be alive. The human spirit, it turned out, was the most powerful force in the galaxy. Not because it could conquer worlds, but because it could change hearts. Even the heart of an alien princess who had traveled across the stars to learn what humans had known all along, that the greatest strength was the courage to care.